Can't join us tonight, but we are joined in the studio by the Labour MP Angela Eagle and from Oxford by the Conservative MP Nadine Dorries. Now, one of the very few concrete achievements that she talked about today was how she was going to be hosting a government roundtable on body image. Nadine Dorries, is that going to be any use to anybody?
Very informative and interesting, and I'm sure it will happen. But I think that, as one of your commentators said, there are bigger issues at the moment which affect women, such as the number of women that we have in boardrooms across companies in the UK and equal pay.
And to be fair to her, she did mention specifically that point. I mean, is this whole body image, body representation, her trumpeting of the fact that Debenhams appears to have been converted by her initiative, does this mean anything, Angela Eagle?
Well, it's important, but I think far more important is what's actually happening with the budget that her government put before us in June. We now know from our own analysis in the House of Commons Library that women are going to be bearing three-quarters of the brunt of that the government didn't even do the equality assessment that by law they're required to do, so they're being taken to court by the Fawcett Society. We'll actually listen to what Lynn has to say about these things if this government pay attention to the important things, and that is why have they decided to put women and children in the front line of the huge cuts that they're going to make to public services.
Well, that's not a deliberate decision. It's a consequence you argue will take place. I mean, Nadine Dorries,
of course it's a deliberate decision.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, do.
The cuts which Angela's talking about, we don't want to make, we aren't enjoying making, but we have to make them because your government overspent, it spent money it didn't have, it borrowed money that we can't pay back.
Nadine,
and you, rather than sitting in the studio and complaining about the cuts, you should be apologising for them.
Disproportionately, they are something presumably you oppose.
Well, I'd like to see, do you have the evidence for this, Jeremy?
Yes, the evidence.
Because, Angela, you should be apologising for these cuts. These cuts are your fault.
No, the cuts are the fault of the problems that we had with the banking crisis. And the point is, when you have to do deficit reduction, you ought to do it in a fair way. It's no good George Osborne saying they're fair when they're not fair.
That shows this
Nadine,
isn't fair.
You can't argue that abolishing the Sure Start maternity grant, that freezing child benefit, that moving all benefits from RPI to CPI, which takes money out of people who are on benefits, money from pensioners, is a fair way of dealing with deficit reduction.
And where were you going to make the cuts, Angela? Because your government was going to make £60 billion and you just didn't tell us where from.
You can't have it both ways, Nadine. One minute you say we're deficit deniers and the next minute you're saying that we were going to make cuts. We set out what we were going to do in the March budget. What we've got here, though, is a letter from Theresa May who warned that the budget would actually affect older people, younger people, ethnic minorities and the disabled more than anyone else.
Therefore you should apologise because these are cuts made by Labour.
Let's look at a structural point here.
Right.
The argument, and you've already alluded to it, Nadine Dorries, that there are very many fewer women in boardrooms than you might have expected given people entering the workforce. Now, something is happening in the way that women work, and it's possibly to do, or probably to do, with maternity and paternity, isn't it?
Well, some of it's about the structure and the shape of working lives and not having enough flexible chances for women to fit their own lives into the working lives that have been established for men. You don't get on in boardrooms if you don't work 90 hours a week, and many women have got caring responsibilities. We need to reshape and restructure the world of work, and we need to drive out discrimination.
You failed to do that. Nadine Dorries, are you going to be any better at it?
We made some progress,
actually,
but it's a hard nut to crack.
Spectacularly in altering the working patterns
Nadine Dorries.
of women.
Just give us one practical thing that you propose to do or will do in government to do something to address that problem.
Well, what we need to do is to change the culture. And one thing that the last government didn't do was keep this on the top of the political agenda. There was no process for keeping this dialogue and the rhetoric of the fact that we need women in the boardroom and we need more flexible working. It just didn't happen. 13 years of Labour and it didn't happen.
Are you looking backwards again?
Well, again, what I would do is I'd do what they do in Norway. I'd require there to be a number of women on each board, and that would assist the culture change, like I was in favour of positive action in Parliament.
Okay. That's one proposal at least we can think about. Thank you. Papers in a moment. First, summer.